Hello and welcome to this Building Smart Room session as part of the buildingSMART International Standards Summit, Rome 2023. Thank you for joining. My name is Laura and I will be your moderator today. Today's session's title is Airport Entity Project Update. The speakers you will hear are on the screen. The session is scheduled to last an hour and a half. The session is being recorded and will be made available in the replay session of the event as soon as possible. Before I hand over to our speakers, I would like to remind you that this is a hybrid event. For online attendee, your microphone will remain muted for the duration of the session. If you wish to ask a question, please use the chat box in the control panel. For those in the room, please try to keep the background noise to a minimum and raise your hand if you wish to make a comment or ask a question. I would like to bring you to your attention that buildingSMART is committed to ensuring that participation in the development of standards is unrestricted and the process for adoption is transparent, and standards that are developed do not favor any particular provider and are open, non-binding, and accessible to all. Please take note of our antitrust code of conduct. Now I would like to hand over to Arisca.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our session today. We kind of changed the title of the session to make it a little bit more open for people to join. So we call it the Asset Lifecycle Management at Airports, Digitalizing the Aviation Industry with Open Standards. And what we'll be talking about today is giving you guys a little bit of background of why we are doing this project, why we think it's important, and the benefits that we see for airports and everyone working with or for airports. I don't think it's working.
Yeah, it's just one sec.
I'll just continue talking then. After the introduction, we'll give you an update on the Airport Entities Project, what we've done so far, what we have achieved, some of the results, and what we are planning on doing in the future. And then we also will finish the presentation with looking ahead. What does the airport room see as potential future projects? A little bit of a looking back at the after summit that we had at Vienna Airport in regards to the buildingSMART Data Dictionary and the role of the BSTD for the airport room. And that will be it. And then there's time for questions. So if you have any questions, just let us know. And we have the microphone here, so we'll bring it to you. It's working. Yeah. Perfect. This is us. We're all presenting today. The only person that is not present is Carl Fitzpatrick. He's from Auckland Airport. He is helping us a ton with the airport room and also with the Airport Entities Project. So that's why we mention him every single time. Unfortunately, he cannot join because he's in New Zealand. So he was also unable to join online, but huge benefit to the airport room.
Thank you, Arisca. Yeah. Thank you. This is better. I had to push this button as well. My name is Gerard from Veer from NACO. I'm an airport architect. And what we envisage at the moment is that we see that we encounter limited resources in all aspects, not only financial means, but also people, land, sustainability, space, everything. So therefore, we must know a bit more about how we bring together airports in general. The knowledge of these building blocks in which we prepare all airports must be aware. For that, we need a language, but we also need some format to expose and to bring to everyone else to collaborate in an open BIM format. For that, we need, as I said, we need that common language, not only just to communicate, but on how we produce, how we work together, but also how we look at all the environment, but also look at the entire life cycle. It's not only the product itself or the project itself, but it's the entire life cycle. For that reason, we need open BIM also to specify the handovers. So if you go from the design to construction to maintain or to operate, you need clear information to hand it over. And you see in a lot of projects, there are the main issues. And therefore we need that language, and the language is based on international standards. So that's the reason why IFC, but especially buildingSMART International, helps us to improve our products. And then maybe, oh, I have to click it. Yep, that's the one. And we talk about airports and why are airports entitled to have their own room? Because you could argue it's just a building or it's just an infrastructural element. But an airport, there comes together quite a number of transportational modes. That's one issue. And it is mostly owned by one client. So we have one client. The client not only owns it, but also operates it. And therefore, it's got multiple hats. So therefore, information flux through the whole process is very important. And it's not only that, there are these airports, they're also very strongly organized. And having a strongly organized way, you also need an organized language, a common language. It also takes into account, it is also requires a lot, as we call it, capital investment. So it needs a lot of money. So therefore, not only money that's in stake, but also the whole process takes a lot of time. Multiple disciplines are involved and multiple stakeholders. So therefore, we have to talk with a lot of people. We have to communicate with a lot of people. In that sense, a language is also very necessary. The other critical aspect of airports is that's an international base. They have to talk all around the world. For that reason, buildingSMART contributes to that similar language. And as Arisca said already yesterday, airports are open 24/7 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a week, so a year. So that means they're always there, they're always on.
So why are we in the airport room then? What are some of the challenges that we run into, and why it's so important to be focusing on open standards and primarily focusing on asset lifecycle management? Because I think that's the, at least for asset management of airports, is what the main focus is on. I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm just going to put them on there. I don't have a presentation in front of me, so I can't really see which one is where. Thanks. But a few of them, just to kind of go over them, information needs to be covered throughout the entire asset lifecycle. One of the biggest struggles today is the fact that the information needs are only focused on one part. So on the projects part, or on the design part, on the construction part. And it needs to be one cycle. We need everyone in the whole asset lifecycle to collaborate. It's kind of what I was talking about yesterday in the opening session as well. Collaboration between all of the parties is very, very important in order to have the right information needs throughout the entire lifecycle. Therefore, we need standardized processes. So we are looking at ISO standards, ISO 19650, and how it helps bring all of that together. We need all parties to be involved. If one party does not do his or her part of the whole picture, then we fail. There will be a hole in the asset lifecycle, and the information needs, or in the information itself, the data the quality of it will go down. And then we want to disconnect the data and the systems. So we really want to work object-oriented instead of system-oriented. So that's also something that we are looking into by the entities project. What entities are primarily needed for airports, but we also came to the conclusion that there's a lot of entities that are needed for airports, but are not necessarily airport specific. Think of fire safety. It's not airport specific, but it's very critical for airports to be standardized so that we can all work with it.
And for that, the focus is on asset lifecycle. And I just came from the sustainability working group next door. And there you see the importance of the asset lifecycle. You see that we need to be aware when products are brought into the system, what are the results, how they develop through the whole process, and how the entire asset is developing. So in order to have to justify what we do at that time. And where do we achieve, or where do we get the information? What information do we have? Primarily, it's the IFC schema, which we produce when designing airports and maintaining airports. What you see that we improve the information on the aviation industry is the buildingSMART data dictionary. We will come to that a bit later about our entities project. But you see the opportunities, what lies there to bring it to a common language. And on the other hand, what we try to achieve is not only that we as an airport room work together, but you see there are a lot of international bodies, so to speak, like ICAO, IATA, ACI, where they have their own means, they have their own regulations. By having a buildingSMART data dictionary, or at least the opportunity for data dictionary, we can combine these regulations and come to a conclusion and base it. And you see there you have, for example, we are working at the moment how to get the IATA Design Manual 12 integrated in a data dictionary so we can check the design based on these regulations. You see that the open standards enables us to do so.
So the airport room, we kind of like took a step back last year of what do we do and why do we do it? What is our mission? What do we want to achieve? And how can we get more airports involved? Because as you could see at the beginning of the slide, just a working group is Vienna Airport, Schiphol Airport, Auckland Airport, and then NACO Royal Haskoning. And then we have some support, obviously, from the steering committee from, I know Kishida is here, from the contracting party. But we want more airports to get involved. So our mission is to develop and deploy open digital standards for the airport environment. And I think by explaining why it's important and the business value for airports, it will actually lead to more use of it so that we have more unification of the digital airport standards so that we're all talking about the same thing. Like Gerard was saying, we need one language within the airport or within the aviation industry, because from there we can actually start working more efficiently and communicate with each other, whether we're here in Rome or at Schiphol or in Australia, wherever. So that's kind of what our mission is. And I think it's a simple sentence, but it took us a while to get to this point. So what is the value proposition? I kind of just mentioned it. So we want to enable airports to capitalize on the digitalization of the built environment so that we can enhance the management of assets throughout the life cycle. So we've been talking a lot about IFC and about IDS and BSDD, which are very, very important aspects. But for airports, the goal is life cycle management, information throughout the entire life cycle that everyone can use. And by doing that, improving our data quality.
Yeah, and there will be some challenges we have to handle. 4 of them in summary. The first thing is actually we need machine-readable formats to hand over data declarations to our softwares. And this is something all of us who are asset owners or who handle data for asset owners have to manage all the time. And actually the problem is there is not a single source which can provide us already with some information like that. But we are very close to that point that we can deliver something like that. But later on, we will show you how this happens. If we have a single source for these declarations, this will improve the possibilities for us a lot because it makes it possible to exchange declarations easily and to exchange asset informations easily in a way that everyone understands clearly what is this in the model, what is the declaration about, and how to use it, and how to combine it with additional informations. I got it. Yeah. The result, or actually the challenge actually is that there is not a standardized classification available. So this was the reason we get together to organize a common view about the classifications we need. So we have different looks about all the different fields of activities which are unique in airports. One is the very often called or very often used baggage handling system, because baggage handling system is something really unique to airports. But we have other fields of activities, for example, every equipment on the airfield, which is also completely unique to airports. No one else needs usually ILS antennas or ramp lights and stuff like this. There will some other equipments on airports which quite common also in other fields. For example, light masks. We identify they are not only unique on airports. When we left the airport in the evening on the street, we say, okay, there are also other light masks. But this makes it even more complicated for us that we have unique equipment for airports, but we have also shared equipment to others. And so we need to handle how they, or what is the important information for them for that equipment, and what is the important information for us on the airport for equipment. For example, if you need thunder protection stuff on an airport for a lot of things, that's if there's a thunderstorm and so on, everything is protected. This is something not everyone needs for light mask, for example. We need it for sure. So the result, if we have a common solution about that, is that we save a lot of time by working on these declarations, because in former times, everyone else of us work on that's unique. So everyone try to identify his equipment, try to identify the properties he needs to describe this equipment and so on. This is a mess of work. Some of us already started with that, for example, Amsterdam or Schiphol Airport. Some of us are in the beginning of that. When we share this work, we have a much huger speed in declaration, and we have a better workable declaration, because all of us thinks about more things we need to be attentive about. Nobody of us is able to have a full picture about all the needs, but if we work together, we identify all the needs which are usable requirements for this stuff we declare here. And so I a little bit make it the explanation not completely conform to our 4 columns we have here, but this is more or less what we want to explain with that. So next slide. So what we try to produce here is an airport-specific collection of requirements. As I already mentioned, requirements which are unique for airports, or which are used from others as well. For example, road operators or railroad operators and so on. And we try to produce an airport-specific addendum for IFC. In former time, we called it extension. We learn already this is not the right word for that. It's an addendum we produce, actually. And the interesting point about that is actually that we identify as well that we need to consolidate these addendums also to other specific domain developers. For example, tunnel or railway or street or roads data structure developer. The data structure the addendum we actually produce here will be produced as some kind of package we want to upload to the BSDD, and we want to make distributable via BSDD. This means if your software, for example, have a BSDD connection, you're able to consume our data structure already. And if you have a software which is able to use IDS, you are able also to hand over this information and to use it by yourself. And you can also extend this data structure with your individual needs. There will be something maybe which is really unique to your airport and nobody else needed. So you are also able to extend these things and make, for example, your private BSDD domain and link your private BSDD domain again to our airport-specific domain. This is something we discuss a lot in these Christmas workshop or after summit workshop in Vienna together with Leon van Berlo, that there are really, really interesting opportunities with the so-called linked data dictionary technology that you need to understand. So because that the difference between public domains, private domains, which are interconnected, they produces a lot of interesting possibilities how you work with that as an operator in the context of data deliverers, for example, engineering offices or deliverers of products you get from the industry and so on. So actually, our setup we're producing here from the airport room is the first big stone you need for a huge puzzle of information setups. And that's the reason we try to work very carefully with that, actually, to make sure that we more or less identify the requirements which are really necessary. Actually, we work only on the declaration of entities or of entities and types, but there will be a next step to produce also the properties you need to describe those things. But this is the next step. This is much more work, so this is something where we need to ask for a funding for this activity, much more than we need it by now. But our idea was actually to make a first big step with this entity declaration and then start another step. And I think this is more or less everything we need to explain. Next slide, please. Yeah. On this slide, we actually try to explain a typical setup, how you work on as a big asset owner, actually, when you start to develop a new project. So usually you have an EIR, which collects all the project-specific requirements for your project. If you're an operator, there are usually 3 declarations above that, because as an operator, usually you have a common setup for all your projects, all your buildings in the airport. So this is usually OIR, PIR, and AIR for the organizational requirements, for the process requirements, and for the asset or data structure requirements. This is usually something like the first input for your EIR in a project. So this picture here is a project-specific picture, not a common picture for the whole airport setup, because there are many different buildings with different needs. For example, if you have a terminal, this EIR looks completely different than you produce as office buildings or a parking house or something like this. For that reason, we focus here on a project-specific setup. If you have an EIR, you are able to produce your BIM execution plan together with the deliverers in your project who are working on the project. They have different possibilities. There's not actually a common setup that every one of them is able to manage the project in the same way. So you need to handle with them or to manage with them how to work. If you make your project during planning, tendering, and construction, usually confirming to the ISO 19650, you have the so-called project information modeling. And usually the biggest thing as an operator is to hand over this information, the results from the project information modeling to your asset information modeling. This is usually the biggest advantage in projects, how to get the information from your deliverers in your own data setup. We have already ideas how we can improve that procedure as well, but Arisca decided, and that's a good decision, to finish at first our entity project and then focus on the handover procedure, because without any entity declarations, you can't hand over something right. That's the problem. There are different opportunities which could be used in a setup like this. We mentioned here only with some small words, for example, laser scans. There is a session tomorrow in the afternoon about georeferenced laser scans in context of georeferenced IFC information. There are many, many interesting possibilities to use very rough models in combination with laser scans to get more context, more information about it. And one very interesting use case could be, for example, site monitoring. If you have a construction site, you need, especially in airports, you need to manage how the construction site is working. Is it confirmed to all the planning information you deliver to the construction site or not? We have very high equipped buildings, so if there is a problem at the beginning and the construction company built it in another way than you did it in your planning, then you get really huge problems. And really huge problems in the airport world means you have usually building or projects with an amount of 500 million euros or twice or more times. And if there's a problem, you have very, very fast a really huge problem, which is going to the newspapers and into the TV and so on. So for that reason, we have to be very, very careful with that. So what we try to say here is this handover of informations here has to be done with open file formats, and we can only provide these open file formats and all the involved software vendors, data deliverers, and so on with open declarations of data structures. That's the reason we have the entity project. If you have here closed solutions, you have not the this is not possible to make sure that if you have long-term projects, to make sure that the information is really handleable at the end of the project. You need to make sure that everything you produce at the beginning of the project is usable up to the end of operation. So this means everything has to be think in long term, and everything has to be usable in long-term thinking. And this is this could be made sure with the data structure setup we produce here already, and with the declarations in the whole context of OpenBIM. Okay. So what we could make possible here is actually, with our strategy, we have inside the planning, tendering, and construction, and even also in the project initiation stage, we have the possibility to be more flexible in changing our data structure environment. But later on, if we have the operational stage, we have no flexibility. And this works a little bit more together than it looks maybe at the beginning of the picture. Oh, next slide, please. This is the most important. Because this means everything which is produced during planning, tendering, and construction stage has to be able to fit in our asset environment later on, in our operational environment. So there is not so much flexibility at the beginning. Everything which is done there at the end needs to get result in a strict data structure from our operational setup. The only flexibility we have here in planning, tendering, and construction is actually that there might be individual additions from the construction or from the planners for themselves. This is typical, the thing you need to deal with at the beginning of the project initiation stage, that there are needs from your side, which needs to fulfill, get delivered at the end, but there are also data structure needs from the participants, how they organize, for example, tendering procedures and so on. Everything which might be not interesting for us at the end, but which is interesting for the participant inside the project. So for that reason, we try to make visible here with the slides that there are different dependencies, how things work together. And you need to be very attentive as an operator, how much flexibility you make possible during the project information modeling stage, and what are your needs at the end, and how you can cover that. Next slide, please. I think I think this is already set to keep in time.
All right, so that was kind of a bit of background of what we're doing, why we're doing it, and the importance of it. So going into a little bit more detail about the Airport Entities project. So kind of giving you guys an update of why we're doing it, which we've talked about, but mainly giving you the update of where we are today. So to start, just to give you an idea, these are the Airport Room Steering Committee members. So they all play a role in developing or at least identifying those new airport entities that we hopefully publish within the BSDD at some point. So it's great to have a good group of people behind us, supporting us and helping us with all of the developments that we are currently working on. The working group itself, that's us. We meet every week for an hour at kind of a odd time because we are working with Auckland. So it's early in the morning for us and late at night for Auckland Airport. But it's really great to meet every week and work on this Airport Entities project. So the challenge, I think, is pretty clear. I think we've talked about it, right? So there's no clear and consistent schema for airport objects or entities, specific airport entities. So this makes the interoperability very difficult. So people will start creating their own entities or use the proxy, build element, just create their own. So it's not really usable for the next party that might be working with the BIM model. So what we are trying to do with this project is create a clear agreement within the airport community. So that's where the steering committee plays a pretty big role as well, so that we can only work with the necessary parts of the IFC schema. So what we have done is identified those objects, mapped them to the IFC version that is 4.3, if I'm correct. And by doing that, focusing again on life cycle management, so that we can, again, the and inconsistent we are facing today working at airports. So the importance of the project. So why did we start with identifying airport entities? Is to ensure that the data is consistently understood and used to improve the management of airports. So it's lots of stakeholders involved working with those objects and working in a BIM model. So the design party will send it over to the construction party, and then it will go to maintenance. So it's important that we're all talking the same language there. So why is it so important for all stakeholders involved is to increase the accuracy and the reliability of the data across all airports. Like I mentioned earlier on, we want to be talking the same language when we're talking about airports. And that way, clear standards will actually provide a solid platform that people can start working on. And in the long run, like Christoph mentioned, Christoph has a lot of great ideas for future projects. However, I think we should really focus first on identifying those objects, publishing them, and see how the market will use it, and hopefully get other airports involved. But I think it's a great base for future projects, such as sustainability topics. Facility management is a big one, but also fire safety, project handover, round tripping. All of those topics we have discussed. So hopefully we can work towards that in the future. So what have we done so far? So this project actually existed for quite a while now. Quite a while. And it did actually start by thinking we were going to extend the current IFC schema. When those people left the airport room, it got quiet for a while. And then in 2020, we decided to reintroduce this project with the current developments within buildingSMART International. So we redefined the project scope back in 2020. We created a one-pager to kind of explain to the business what we think would be the next steps. And we established the regular working group that you saw in the previous slides. In 2021, we collected a bunch of lists with airport-specific entities, which we'll get into a little bit more later, but we got a lot of input, collected all of them, took out all of the doubles and the duplicates, and created a final list of entities that we used for the project proposal. And then between 2021 and 22, we also tried to get some funding. So we worked on the project proposal, and we actually did receive some sponsorship, which was very exciting for us. And we created the airport domain in the BSDD. Maya will go into a little bit more detail later on about that. And then from the last year, we focused very much on the surveys. So we created some surveys with our proposal because there's only a few of us. We can't decide how we should work. So we want input from the business. And so we created surveys asking, with the mapping to IFC, the name of the entity, and when it was needed, the user-defined or predefined type, asking if everyone agreed, and if they did not agree, what they would propose. So we started with the baggage handling survey. We got a lot of responses, and that's what we are working on today, is processing all of those responses, potentially getting in touch with the people that did not agree with our proposal and ask for a little bit more detail on that. And we created new surveys, which we'll go into a little bit later.
Yes, like Arisca said, we in 2022 we created the airport domain into the data dictionary as a pilot to test if it works and if it does what we intended it to do. And we uploaded 4 of our entities. You can see them here. This is, of course, just the beginning of the whole airport-specific domain we want to create. And if you go to the next slide. This slide illustrates a bit of the problem we have currently. All disciplines and all contractors, owners, asset owners, designers, they all use their own wording, which makes collaboration more difficult, but it also makes it difficult to make it machine readable and to make software that's dedicated for the purpose of airport assets. And where we want to go is to have in an open BIM way, standardize the naming, standardize the properties, the attributes in a way that we all understand each other, we can work together. And the software like package handling simulation software or asset management software understands the same as we do, and it becomes manageable. Okay, to achieve that, we had a couple of actions we already took. And one was, like Arisca already said, I think, is we created one big database with all entities we think are airport specific. So we used Schiphol's knowledge, we used Auckland, Vienna, NACO's knowledge, and we gathered all this into one big list, combined this, then we identified which ones were double. So they had different names, but we clearly saw they were double to make it one big list. We categorized it into categories like navigate, package handling systems to make it manageable. We mapped it into IFC 4.3, so we related the naming we came up with the IFC, with already existing IFC entities. And where it was needed, we also made user-defined types because it was just missing. It was too airport-specific, not available in the schema made by the building room and infra room. And for better human interpretation, we added images.
And I think these images were thank you, microphone, old problem. This trick with the images was really, really important because there are so many small differences in the equipment, especially in the airfield equipment, that only the images helps us really to make sure that we have an accurate decision. So Airtable was our first step to consolidate all the different data structure components to make sure that we have one unique understanding about this thing on the picture is called like that and had this kind of functionality and is more or less placed on that kind of airport part. So is it on the runway, is it in the terminal, is it in the baggage handling system, and so on. So we sort things in the first step. The next step was to get the control about IFC mapping. IFC mapping means all the content we declared as components of our data structure need to get fitted with the existing IFC standard. At the beginning, we started with IFC 4. To be honest, a lot of stuff was declared as proxy elements because there was nothing existing we could use. This was a little bit frustrating because we got really huge declarations. Everyone who knows it is a little bit familiar with proxy elements and user-defined declarations knows this is a very, very long declaration we got and so on. And it was also very heavy to identify, is there something existing? Yes or no we can use. Later on, there was IFC 4.3 released around about a year ago. And it seems to get much easier to get real usable declarations we could use or we could more or less adapt for our use. And this was the time we think, okay, now it's time to come in use with a tool which supports us to handle these declarations. Airtable was very, very good to get to support us in the procedure to consolidate the components. The next step was to handle the declarations, how it fits to IFC. And in this time, we switched to a new tool. It's called BIMQ. It's a tool from Germany. And it's a web-based data structure development tool, which get more and more increasing of functionalities. But the most important thing for us at the beginning was to hand over the declarations from Airtable. This could be done more or less easily with Excel sheets. So we produced and consolidated Excel sheets inside Airtable, and we hand over it directly to BIMQ. This is the thing you see here on the screen at the first row. With this first row, this was only the collection of the data structure. We sorted the declarations in different domains, package handling system, navigate stuff, and so on, all the things you have as a different domain part on an airport. And this was our core data structure. The next thing we hand over the images for the descriptions. This was not in so much automatically driven process, to be honest. This was added manually because hand over pictures with Excel doesn't work well. So for that reason, we had handled this manually to add them. And the next step was only for our own evaluation that we already produces a mapping to an internal data structure from a BIM application. At the beginning, this was only Archicad and Revit because this is the most common software for our pilot modeling stuff. But we are able by now to deliver much more other applications with our declarations. But this is something I will mention later on more in detail. And what you see here is more or less a more and more complex data setup we produce because we have here for sure also the possibility to map to different IFC versions. And everyone which has very good eyes could maybe see that on the right side, you see the IFC4 mapping, this one here, which is blinking by now. And on the left, you have the IFC 4.3 mapping, which is blinking by now. IFC 4.3 is very specific already because we have entities which could use by us, very specific. We don't need to produce so much user-defined declarations. IFC4, most of this stuff here is in building proxy elements. So it's seen maybe from the last row as well, because it's the same word all the time. So IFC4 mapping is only produced by us to make it work by now in pilot projects, to hand over our data structure declarations inside BIM applications. This is looking like that. So there is a possibility to produce configuration file for different BIM applications and to hand over this in a BIM application. This is a very primitive Archicad setup. We produced in Montreal during breakfast, if I remember right. And I hand over, in this picture you see, this is the way to hand over in classification from BIMQ directly in Archicad. If you use that in Revit, there are several add-ons which have exactly the same functionality. And with this declaration, or with this classification, I'm able to declare different components with different declarations. I'm also able to hand over the IFC export configuration file. So I can make sure that these declarations I use here for different objects work with the IFC mapping. We need to have to produce a correct IFC file at the end. So the good thing is here, if you have a setup like this, you don't need to manually produce your IFC configuration files, your internal data structure. You can hand over these things directly from BIMQ. Actually, this process here usually works with individual configuration files. Individual means individual for Revit, individual for Archicad, for Allplan, and all the other tools. In our opinion, since our meeting with Leon before Christmas in Vienna, this might be completely done with IDS files in future, because an IDS file is a complete description for a data structure. So we don't need to deliver individual configuration files for every software. We could use a common file like IDS or a common declaration like IDS for that in future. There is actually one software venture who already use exactly that way. This is BricsCAD, because they joined our session there and they didn't have support for BIMQ. And they say, okay, we don't need an individual configuration here. We use IDS because IDS is already available in BIMQ as an export. And this is an interesting move, actually, which might be interesting also for other vendors. The configuration files here for the IFC export and so on get imported as well. So we have here then the internal data structure combined with the IFC mapping, as I mentioned already. I forgot only to show you the slides. And the next step for us is, because usually we are asset owners or engineers who wants to deliver the best quality. This means we have to make quality checks before we hand over, or in our case, after we get the stuff. For that reason, we need checking files or checking configurations. And in order days, checking configurations for LOI setups to check the whole data structure of an airport against hand-overed IFC files are really a mess of work. In our case, usually we have around about 65,000 declarations at the airport. And if I have to serve or if I have to maintain these checking rules, it's work for one person the whole year to make sure that this fits to our official declaration. Luckily, the developer of BIMQ produces an LOI checking rule, which is working together with the BIMQ setup directly. So you don't need to produce the checking rules by yourselves in future. This is available since, I think, around about 12 months. And with this checking rule, you are able to directly load a checking rule setup, which works in combination with the model content, and which also contains the classification you need for checking rules and the rule setup for itself. And this gives you the opportunity to make sure that all the content which is part of your IFC file really fits to the IFC configuration you produces in BIMQ. So what we got here is we only produces one correct object. The others have problems. Usually if you make pilot setups, you need more problems than correct elements. It looks dangerous, but it's the use of pilot projects usually to make sure that the checking rules works. If you have only correct content, your checking rules might work or not. You can't see it. It's a problem. This checking setup here is directly combined with the BIMQ setup with an API link. There's also the possibility to use a static file, maybe in future also an IDS file as a data template for your checking rule, that the checking rule is looking to the file and you don't need a live connection to BIMQ. This is necessary if you're working in protected environments. We have a lot of these in airports where you don't have connection to internet. And for that reason, we have also in future an offline solution for the checks. And this checking rule is connected directly here to our setup from the airport room, and it's making sure that all the actually declarations inside BIMQ really get checked against the IFC file we had already. So this is completely available by now, so there is nothing which is future stuff or so. This is the work this is the setup we can use already since around about a year. Interesting stuff maybe about BIMQ. Since we make the slides, there's a lot of improvement from them after our meeting also in Vienna. They improved that we have already the possibility to include also BSDD domains directly from the BSDD as a classification we can combine as well with our BIMQ content. And we have already available an IDS export for all the declarations we use here. So if we are ready, for example, with our airport entity projects and we got feedback from the surveys and finalize our setup, we could provide everyone with an IDS file already with the working declarations. So I think we are maybe one of the rooms which could use IDS really in practice as one of the earliest. So this is really a great step for us as well. Yes.
Thank
Interesting
you.
is the right sort. This was not prepared.
Great. Yeah, so as it was already mentioned in, I think it was around October 2021, when the whole discussions about BSDD were starting a lot. So we wanted to see actually what is happening, what is exactly BSDD and how we can use it to our benefit. At that point, we had already a huge list of objects, as we mentioned before, the ones that we combined from everyone that gave us the different airport-specific objects. And I think there were around 92 different objects, and from them, we picked up only 4. We said, let's try a pilot, let's see what exactly is the BSDD and how it can help us. So at that time, we chose an anti-return gate, the automated border control reader, an approach light mast, and the check-in conveyor. As it was already mentioned, we had an IFC 4.3 mapping, and at that time we had to create a JSON file. So there was a very well-informed webpage in GitHub where you can actually find all the information about the creation of this JSON file. And basically, just in simple steps, we went into this link, we created the IFC airport domain. Basically, we tried out the API by importing the JSON file So in the next slide, we have just, well, multiple times it wasn't working, of course, but then at some point we imported the JSON file with these 4 objects. As I mentioned before, we included the IFC 4.3 mapping. In there, you will see later on in a short video that in some of them, we used the predefined types, as already mentioned, and in some of them, there were no predefined types, so we used user-defined type. We also added images, so you will see as well the images later on. We had a very good communication with the BSDD team, and basically in number 6, if you click this link, you can find. So here we search for anti-return gate. You see the IFC airport domain. You can click on it. You see this is the unique identification code for this particular object. The IFC entity, IFC communications appliance, and its user-defined type. Didn't have a predefined type, and then you can see the anti-return gate, which we added later on. At the bottom, there is the link, the URL to the image of the anti-return gate that you saw before. So in the next part, you will see the other, the approach light mast. And then here, it's a user-defined type. So basically, we use the IFC navigation element beacon. These were just the steps in case the video wasn't working. So I will just go to the next one. So then basically, in order to succeed and in order to add objects inside the BSDD, so inside our airport domain, as it was said before, we created surveys. And I need to pass this actually to Arisca. Okay.
But it was a good introduction.
Yes. Why did we do that? We needed to verify the proposed mapping. We needed to verify the proposed mapping with subject matter experts. This is the most important thing for us because we cannot be specialized into every single domain. We have connections with a lot of subject matter experts, and we also spread it around the surveys. We wanted to verify the proposed names and also to check the completeness. We figured out, we will show you later on, that of course a lot of things are missing, and a lot of things, when you dive into a lot of details, you figure out that there are a lot of things that we need to define better, like different user-defined names, user-defined types, names, and also properties that are really necessary, as it was mentioned before. We also realized that we have to identify the objects that have overlap with other rooms, because like it was mentioned before, for fire safety, there are a lot of objects that have an overlap with rooms like the railway room, the infrastructure room, the building room. So in the next slide, you can see actually the different surveys we created. We have the different categories: the baggage handling systems, the airport-specific security systems and passenger control, nav-aid and meteorological equipment, civil airfields, and the terminal. The first one is the one that has already, we delivered it last year. We are already processing the results, and the other 4, we have them ready, so I think they're already live. The deadline is at the end of August, so you have enough time to give us your feedback, and then we will have to process all the results. The end goal is to actually upload, import everything inside the airport, the IFC airport domain in the buildingSMART data dictionary. About the baggage, sorry. Too fast, yes. About the baggage handling system survey. The responses that we received were 58. The surveys were delivered, and the new surveys as well will be delivered in different languages. Here you can see that 34 responded on the English survey, 7 on the French. We had a lot of the responses in Spanish, several Italians and Portuguese. So this is great. We need more input, and please check the next surveys that will come.
The new surveys are also available in German, so we have also to reach also the German markets. So maybe we got much more, and maybe 58 for some people might be not 58 for some people might be not much, but you need to understand that this is not a very fast survey because there are a lot of declarations and it's a lot of work to do. So it's, I think, around about half an hour or 35 minutes or so. And to get qualified feedbacks from all over the world, 58 comments of 58 complete surveys are really a lot for us. So this was a really success for us.
And it's a success that is mostly from specialized, from people with knowledge on this domain. So what we saw by diving more into the baggage handling system survey is that we focused a lot on the conveyor, actually, the baggage handling system conveyor type. But we realized by looking into that and by actually checking into what models do we have internally, that there is also the individual carrier system type of baggage handling systems, and there might be also more. So a whole world is opening up as more as you dive into the details, of course. But then we also figured out that there are more challenges, like, for example, objects that are not airport specific, but still they are part of the whole system. And this is, for example, a ladder, or in the other case, a stair. There is also the pusher, the ICS stacker, and many more. So now we need to figure out the boundaries. Where do we have to stop? Which ones we actually want to include in the IFC airport domain and which ones not. And the ones that we don't want to include, how we will handle them with other rooms. Are we going to create one common domain? How is this going to be connected with our domain? So there are a lot of questions now we are starting to create, especially about the buildingSMART data dictionary and how to handle this. Who is going to maintain which domain? With this, I will pass it on as well to Mike for the next challenge.
Yeah. This morning I was at the session. I saw, I think Kubus showed their BIM Collab Zoom IDS plugin. I think Akka also has a plugin that has an IDS that will automatically validate attributes. But to be able to validate attributes, you need to know which attributes you need to validate. So I think that's our big step. Next step is once we have the entities defined, we're going to dive into the attributes that need to be attached to these elements. And I think here you see already kind of an example of what kind of attributes we're talking about. Of course, they're all attributes that all stakeholders involved need. But these ones specifically are an example because these kind of properties, like for a baggage handling system, like a belt direction, the belt speed, the dimensions, you need them to be for software, baggage handling simulation software, to be able to do the simulation. So this will, I think, be one of the most important next steps we will be taking in the future as the airport entity project.
With that being said, that was kind of what we have been working on the last 2 years. I think it's great. We've got a lot of input. However, at the same time, we want to move forward faster. However, even though we got some contribution, a lot of it is in-kind contribution that we're doing. So we are meeting once a week, but if someone has another meeting or something else going on at work, we cancel the meeting. So it's a lot of in-kind personal time, which is awesome. But this is where we are today. So looking forward, what are the next steps for the airport room? Like Maya mentioned, we are working on processing the results of the baggage handling survey. We're going through all of the feedback, which takes a lot of time because for each entity, we had 5 questions. Do you agree with the name? Yes or no. If it's no, what would you propose? Do you agree with the mapping? Yes or no, or I don't know. And if it was no, what would you propose? And then at the end of the survey, we ask if anything was missing. So like Maya said, we're probably not complete. This is just a first step. And even when we were going through the baggage handling results, we're like, oh, I think we forgot this or this. So it's great getting that input from other airports, but it's still a lot of work to be done. We also, because we want to make use of the buildingSMART data dictionary, we're looking into adding definitions, more images like Maya mentioned, but also making it more user-friendly. Instead of copying and pasting a link, it would be great if something like that can be integrated within the viewer. And we want to look into the specific properties and potential classification that still need to be added. So those are some of the next steps after defining the final list. Like Maya mentioned, with all of the questions, we still need some more answers for the use of the BSDD and IFC. I think the summit in Rome is really focusing on that. So I think it's great that there's a lot of attention to the buildingSMART data dictionary, and hopefully we'll get our answers this week. And of course, we want to add our finalist list to the airport domain of the buildingSMART data dictionary so that it becomes available for everyone to start using it, to start exploring it, and hopefully also for us to get more input of potential things that are missing. We've also talked about implementing structured data templates to the asset models. It's something that has just been discussed, but maybe that's something for a future project. And we also want to look into better communication with the software vendors for optimal realization, because at the end of the day, we cannot realize this without software vendors. We know that all of our users work with software, so we need to start talking to them in order for them to understand what we're doing. And of course, last but not least, we want for more people to start using the airport domain throughout the entire asset lifecycle. So we're really trying to promote the project and get more people involved.
Yes, and all of these questions were handled in the after summit in Vienna, but we don't got answers for all the questions, to be honest. But what we did was quite fruitful, because we invited Leon van Berlo and several other people who are familiar with the toolbox of BSDD, or I think actually it's called OpenBIM Framework already. So what you can see here is something like the resorts, what we did there. And we try to organize a little bit the possibilities of all the, or we try to identify the possibilities of this OpenBIM framework, of all the tools we can use already. Arisca already mentioned a lot of these things, and I think the basic question for us was at first how we can deliver software ventures something like our requirements, that they can deliver us a solution. What's the best way for that? I already mentioned that IDS could play a very important role in that, how to translate or how to deliver our requirements for data structure. But we identify as well, actually, the typical use cases we operate usually on airports are quite not public, and nobody understands so much in detail how we work and what are the needs of us. And usually when we work with data models, when we work with different BIM applications and so on. So for that purpose, we identified that the use case management tool from Switzerland could be a very interesting solution for us to collect these different use cases and to make them comparable and completely understandable, and to combine these use cases with data structure declarations, which are more or less declared completely in BSDD, or more or less hand over via IDS to BSDD. So our idea was to combine all of these different tools together to make a workflow for us, which is maybe not only the perfect workflow for us, for ourselves, maybe also for other rooms who are representing asset owners. For example, the hospitals, for example, building owners, and so on. All of them usually needs to describe their use cases to identify the requirements, and then really identify the properties or entities they need, and then hand over this to BSDD. And in context of that question, we identify, if we think about us and the others, there are some new topics we need to make sure that everyone understands it in the same way and everyone work in the same way. And the most important thing is usually if we have content on the BSDD and other people have also additional content on BSDD, how this fits together, how they get linked together. And this was, I think, in the afternoon on that December the 14th, this was the basic question, how to make it work. And I think there were more or less answers already for that. But it needs to get a common sense about that, how to work with that. And this is actually the open question from that day. But we want to repeat the day to get more answers for that question. But it was a good beginning, I think.
So another big thing that we were able to accomplish was in Montreal. We went by the rooms asking to start collaborating, start working together, start identifying those objects that are part of the railway room as well as the airport room. And the railway room was very excited about that. So we actually have a joint session tomorrow at 1:30 in the afternoon, and it's really focusing on a workshop style. We want to actually start the discussion going. At first, we started with just the railway room, but after some of the other rooms heard about it, they also were very interested. So now we also have the infra room joining us. And I think the electrical room is what it's called, the new room that is being added. And someone from the IFC tunnel project. So that's also infra, but very exciting for all of us to get together. I think this is a big step within Building Smart, but also for our project after all of the slides that we just showed you. So feel free to join the discussion. It's both focusing on the overlapping entities, but also on all of the questions that we still have regarding the Building Smart Data Dictionary. Like Maya was saying, some of the ownership, the maintenance, the use of the Building Smart Data Dictionary when we have objects that are part of several disciplines.
And maybe isn't it it's good to add that you have rooms, but now we create corridors between rooms. You know, it's not mine, it was Nick Nesbitt, but I think it's a nice metaphor for these collaboration.
So to finish this presentation, we are hoping to further develop information standardization. We really want to position the Building Smart Airport Room within the aviation industry. We need more airports involved, get more input. I think the surveys were a great first step because there were a lot of airports that did respond to the surveys, but it would be even better if they actually come help us with some of the projects, because there's a lot of knowledge within the world regarding the aviation industry. We also want to connect to other international aviation organizations. Gerard mentioned IATA, IACC, and some other of those organizations that play a big role within the aviation industry. And like I just mentioned, connecting and collaborating with some of the other rooms, which I think tomorrow is a first session that we are really looking forward to. But here are some examples as well, looking at the infra room, the railway room, the product room. So those are all topics that can be discussed with all of the different people that are here today at Building Smart International. Are there any questions? I'll give you the microphone. How does it turn on?
In case of use case model, have you considered using IDM?
The use case management platform is based on IDM. So everything on the use case management platform is conformed to the ISO 24899. So the use case management platform is a process tool to work in the complete scope of IDM to describe use cases. So this fits completely in the ISO measure. Okay, great.
Yes.
Hello. Yeah. So as a software vendor, I'm actually interested as well, and I'm glad to see from where I read the title, it's about an update of IFC entities, but it's much further in your terms of development. I'm very happy to see that, and especially in looking at IDS, I think there is a great opportunity there to really verify that. And actually, what you exactly mentioned is, for us as well as a software vendor, it starts with use cases. So having those accessible to us, because we're in the middle of development of IDS and how this all looks, I can speak for a lot of software vendors that are also in development now. And for us, it's just, there is a new standard, and that offers a lot of, well, restriction and options, but also, limitations. And it's a back and forth. It's a conversation for us as well. So my main question here is, what I'm trying to get to is, how do we access the use cases from you, and how do we,
So this use case management platform is a public platform, and if we release a use case, this is public available. And usually we can communicate, or we can distribute this use case later on also and directly with buildingSMART International. So usually you got informed about that very easily. this release procedure inside the use case management make sure that the use case is really confirmed to the IDM declaration, that the content is described in the right sort, that it's understandable, and that's really comparable. So the density of the declarations should be confirmed to the others. This is actually the most, it's a little bit strange that from time to time at the beginning from the use case management, there were some use cases which are very roughly described, and we learn more or less to make it more in a common way, that it's really, it contains enough information that you really get the thing you need to know about it. And for that reason, there is already a release procedure which makes sure that the quality is really good enough for you. Usually it contains also a process modeling map, because we learned also that describing complex procedures need business process modeling maps to make sure that everyone understands correctly the different participants and the interaction between participants. More or less, actually, it's also necessary to describe with generic IT maps the constellations between the different softwares we are using. This should be also part of these descriptions. But we have to start with that. We didn't start already. We have to start in the next step with that. And also, again, need to identify which is a typical common use case. At Vienna Airport, we finished already a big research project, which runs around about the last 3.5 years to identify the use cases in our own organization. And we will, this could be a suggestion to start with that and put it in the front of the other airports, and then we decided, okay, this is a common use case, this not, and so on. It's the same thing we did with the entities at the beginning. Put everything on the table and then talk about which is relevant for all, which is too much specific for our use case.
But in general, I'm also very interested in your rough explanation without going into the specifics of how you think it should work with IDS, IDM, whatever. I'm also very interested in your story behind it. I'm very interested in knowing what you run into and why.
From time to time, this is the most necessary information.
Exactly.
The story in behind. This is really from time to time interesting. It could be interesting for us to know what's really necessary for you to understand roughly what's going on. So if you can deliver us only briefly what you need to know, only to have a first picture, this could be interesting for us as well.
Yeah, so I think 15 minutes is not going to make it today. But in general, I think it's good to get into conversation, yes.
Interested, you could also join the steering committee at some point, because we're always looking for presenters, and please talk to the whole steering committee and show us what you are looking for, so we can get the discussion going within the airport room steering committee. I think that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Questions? I should not walk so fast.
Thank you so much for your presentation and for your work, wonderful work. And just a statement. At the beginning, I was supposing that the airport room was in the triangle of buildingSMART, like you have the users, the techies, and the standard guys. You were on the users, and I can see that you are doing both, which is very intelligent and important, because you are precisely delivering what the users need. So thank you. Portugal will probably, we nominated someone to be with you that unfortunately can't be here, but we will have inputs from we are about to mandate a new big airport for Lisbon, because the actual one will be demolished probably. So we are extremely interested. Only 2 questions. The first one is not a question, but I suppose that UCM is like, you don't have like a standard way or template for you to publish the use cases. So each one can publish their own use case with the information that they do think. It's not so standardized the way that you put. So I am afraid, I want your comment, but I'm afraid that might be not too standardized enough. But, and the second one, the IDS. You explained that very well, that we will have a validator that will come through this new domain and through the extensions, and will validate. But are you thinking in validating as well the rules that you will need, like distances, rates. So you can have a little bit inside of the IDS a rule confirmation. Are you thinking about it, about the process? Sorry.
Should I? I have a try. At first, thank you very much for the compliment. Really, really fine. About the UCM, the problem is, the IDM standards already declare what kind of information you have to deliver, but it doesn't declare the quality of the declaration. So in Austria, we have actually already published a lot of use cases, and we work like that we have some standardized use cases, which is the reference for the others. So you have more an understanding how much you have to describe about the objective of the use case, for example, and about the use of the object of the use case, and so on. So this helps to have it more or less in a common quality. This doesn't decrease the possibilities what you can describe. It's only something like a manual for you that you know how detailed you have to describe the things, because you can't go too much in detail because it's getting too long. Nobody will read it. But you need to have enough information that everyone have the same picture when you read the things. So this is actually the point with the use cases. So there's a standardized way in what you have to deliver, and we only need to coordinate how much you have to deliver for every point. So this is the use case topic. About the purpose with the IDS, I think this is the potential in the cooperation with the aviation industry, especially with the standardization institutes like EIDO and so on, because they declare all these dependencies and the rule sets on airports. So they are the perfect ones who can use our data structure framework and put machine-readable rules inside this thing. We have a more or less similar situation in the regulatory room with the governments. They have also a data structure based on IFC, and now they try to completely switch their existing rule sets from laws and everything else you have, and if you have the building declarations, to make it machine readable. So this is a new layer based on IFC, declare the rules. And the IDS is the solution to transport these things, because you have the possibility for dependencies, to transport dependencies or describe them in a machine readable unique way. And we should use, it's a great idea, we should use these aviation organizations exactly, that they understand that this is the potential in behind. And the good thing is we don't waste the time already, because IDS is too new to make it in before. Now we have with IDS the solution to make it work, to transport these things in an open file format in a standardized way.
And that's the reason why we have to negotiate.
Microphone. Sorry.
No, but that's the reason why we have to communicate and collaborate with IATA, ICAO, ACI. And that is because they don't have rule sets yet. They only have big books where what you need to apply to. And therefore we started our first challenges and look if we could translate their information into something what we could use. So that, but that means you are not talking about entities, but you're more about areas or spaces. So we need to rethink that process. That's what we are trying to aim for at the moment.
I also think, I was just in the session about the ISO, I think Anouk, you were too. I think it is also very important to look at the processes around it and how we can kind of merge that or link it with like the processes that are needed for it to work throughout the entire S life cycle. So we need to start talking to more than just the aviation industry, but also to a higher level of, okay, how is this actually going to work when we have all of those different stakeholders working this way? Do we have questions online?
No. But Steve said that you did a great job. Bravo.
Thank you. No more questions? All right, well, thank you guys very much for joining. Thank you.